pressure beneath the surface. If you're brave enough to keep watching, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop a comment now. Because once you go under with this story, there's no fast way back to the surface. The sirens cut through the fog like blades. Red and blue lights washed over the black water of the harbor, reflecting off ripples that shouldn't have been there at this hour. It was just past 3 a.m. when the first patrol boat reached the exclusion zone, engines throttling down as officers stared at something none of them were prepared to explain. A body had surfaced. Not floating freely, not drifting in with the tide, but rising straight up, as if pushed from below. The divers who pulled it out noticed the same detail at the same time. The wrists were marked with deep, circular bruises, almost perfectly even, like restraints designed by an engineer, not a criminal improvising in panic. The lungs were flooded, but that wasn't what unsettled the medical examiner. It was the pressure damage. Whoever this was, they hadn't drowned near the surface. They had come from deep. By sunrise, the harbor was sealed, the incident logged as a suspicious death, and the name of the victim finally surfaced. Evan Klein, age 32, investigative journalist, freelance, persistent, and, according to his editor, obsessed with a story he refused to talk about in detail. A story Evan had described only once, in a late-night message sent 6 hours before his death. People think it's a myth, the message read. But myths don't leave paper trails. This one does. Detective Mara Ellison stood on the pier with her coat pulled tight, eyes fixed on the water, as if it might confess. She had worked homicide for 15 years, long enough to recognize when a case was going to burrow into her life and refuse to leave. This was one of those cases. What was he doing out here, she asked. The harbor master shook his head. No authorized vessels. No scheduled dives. This stretch is dead at night. Nothing is ever dead, Mara said quietly. Evan Klein wasn't a thrill seeker. His work focused on systems, institutions, secrecy, the machinery of power that thrived on silence. He didn't chase serial killers or street crime. He followed money, contracts, and classified programs that governments pretended didn't exist. And lately, he'd been chasing a rumor so bizarre it had been dismissed by every major outlet. An underwater prison. The idea had exploded online months earlier. Grainy images, leaked diagrams, anonymous posts claiming there was a detention facility hidden beneath the ocean, designed for inmates who were never meant to see daylight again. No court records, no names, just disappearances. Most people laughed it off. A viral myth, a conspiracy theory fueled by sci-fi movies and internet paranoia. Evan Klein hadn't laughed. He'd gone quiet. The first lead came from Evan's apartment. His place was neat to the point of obsession, except for one room, the office. Papers covered the floor in careful chaos. Printed emails, declassified memos, shipping manifests, environmental impact reports. All legitimate documents, all boring on their own, until someone noticed the pattern. Every document referenced deep-sea infrastructure, subsea cables, experimental habitats, private maritime contractors with defense ties, and one name that appeared again and again, always just off to the side of the main text, never explained. Project Blackcurrant. Mara flipped through Evan's notebook, the margins packed with tight handwriting. Blackcurrant doesn't exist on paper, one note read, but it exists in logistics. Another, prisons don't have to look like prisons if no one can see them. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The official narrative moved fast, too fast. By noon, a statement was prepared. Accidental death, likely linked to an unauthorized dive. Risky journalism. Tragic, but not criminal. Mara pushed back immediately. Unauthorized dive, with what equipment? She asked during the briefing. Where's the gear? Where's the vessel? Silence answered her. Someone higher up wanted this wrapped neatly. Closed. Forgotten. That only made it louder. Across town, in a quiet cafe that prided itself on discretion, a woman named Lena Voss sat with her back to the wall, hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. She had worked with Evan once, years earlier, on a story about offshore black sites. When she heard his name on the news, she knew two things instantly. First, he hadn't drowned by accident. Second, Whatever he'd found had finally found him back. Lena had ignored Evan's last voicemail. She would regret that for the rest of her life. They moved it, his voice had said, low and urgent. The facility. It's not where people think. It's deeper. And it's not just holding criminals. Now she stared at her phone, watching a message draft she couldn't bring herself to send. I know, she whispered to no one. I know. The myth of the underwater prison had started innocently enough. A blurry satellite image posted online. A shape on the ocean floor that didn't match natural formations. Then a whistleblower claiming it was a prototype detention site, designed to eliminate escape, oversight, and accountability in one elegant solution. Pressure replaces walls. Water replaces guards. Officially, no government admitted to anything like it. Unofficially, budgets went missing. Contractors signed non-disclosure agreements, so restrictive they bordered on imprisonment themselves. Evan had followed the money, and now he was dead. Mara's phone buzzed as she stood in Evan's office, staring at a wall covered in strings and pinned documents. The old-school kind of investigation that suggested obsession had crossed into fear. You need to see this, the forensic analyst said. At the morgue, the room smelled like antiseptic and unanswered questions. The analyst pointed to a screen showing scans of Evan's injuries. These marks, he said, zooming in. They're consistent with restraints. Not handcuffs. Something broader. Designed to distribute pressure evenly. For what purpose? Mara asked. To keep someone alive, he replied. At depth. Mara didn't respond. She didn't have to. By the end of the day, the case file had grown heavy, not with answers, but with resistance. Requests denied. Calls unreturned. A subtle tightening around the investigation that told Mara she was walking toward something powerful and very unhappy. That night, as rain tapped against her window, she reviewed Evan's final notes again and again. One line stood out, underlined twice. They don't call it a prison. They call it a solution. Her phone rang. Blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. Detective Ellison, a man's voice said calmly. I'd strongly advise you to stop digging into Evan Klein's work. Mara straightened. And who are you? A friend, the voice replied. One who doesn't want to see another body come up from the water. The line went dead. Miles away, beneath the surface of the ocean, something hummed to life. Lights flickered on in a place never meant to be seen. Steel corridors groaned under the weight above them. Somewhere inside, a door sealed shut with a sound that echoed through water and bone alike. And on a secure server, a file updated itself automatically. Status, compromised. Response, initiate containment. Back in Evan's office, Mara noticed something she'd missed before. A small safe hidden behind a bookshelf. It wasn't locked. Inside was a single flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop, heart pounding. The screen filled with footage, dark blue-tinted, distorted by water and time. A corridor. Narrow. Metallic. A human figure being escorted by guards in heavy suits, their faces obscured. Then the camera tilted, just enough to show a window. Beyond it, endless black water. At the bottom of the screen, a timestamp glitched in and out. And a label burned itself into Mara's mind. Black current. Holding level 3. She leaned back, breath shallow. Because the footage wasn't old. It was dated 2 days ago. And as the clip ended, one final detail became impossible to ignore. The prisoner being escorted turned slightly toward the camera. It was Evan Klein. Alive. But not anymore. And whatever had held him down there was still operating. Still hidden. Still waiting. The truth about the underwater prison wasn't a question of if anymore. It was a question of how many people would disappear before it finally surfaced. The weight of silence. The footage ended abruptly, the screen freezing on Evan Klein's face, paler than Mara remembered, eyes darting not with panic, but calculation. As if he'd known this moment would matter later. As if he'd wanted someone to see it. Mara shut the laptop slowly. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. This wasn't just a homicide anymore. It was a buried operation, A lie layered so deep it relied on the ocean itself to keep quiet. She didn't log the flash drive as evidence. Not yet. Experience had taught her that the fastest way to lose the truth was to hand it to the wrong system. By morning, the pressure began. Her captain called her into his office before she'd even finished her coffee. The blinds were closed, lights dimmed, as if secrecy itself had become a decor choice. "You're off the Klein case," he said without preamble. Mara didn't sit. "On what grounds?" "Jurisdictional overlap," he replied smoothly. "Federal interests." She almost laughed. Federal interests don't surface bodies with restraint marks. Her captain leaned forward. "This is bigger than you think." "I think that's the problem," Mara shot back. "You think I don't know that?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Let it go, Mara. For your own good." She left without responding. Silence, she knew, was how complicity dressed itself up as wisdom. Lena Voss didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment with the lights off, laptop glowing, cross-referencing Evan's old messages with new developments. She had her own archive, files she'd kept after leaving investigative journalism for consulting, a softer word for surviving. Her screen filled with names she hadn't seen in years. Contractors, engineers, logistics managers who'd vanished from public records after lucrative defense deals. One name resurfaced like a bad memory. Adrian Cole, former naval engineer. Brilliant. Unstable. Fired from a government-funded deep-sea habitat project after raising ethical concerns. He'd gone dark soon after. Evan had mentioned him once. Just once. "Cole knows," Evan had said in a hushed call months earlier. He helped build it. Lena hesitated only a moment before typing. Mara met resistance everywhere. Her badge opened doors, but only halfway. Requests for shipping logs came back redacted. Surveillance footage from the harbor malfunctioned conveniently during the critical window. Even her emails began bouncing back with vague system errors. Someone was watching her. She confirmed it when a black sedan followed her for 6 blocks, never close enough to be obvious, never far enough to be coincidence. When she turned abruptly into a crowded parking structure, it didn't follow. A warning, not a pursuit. That night, her phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. "You're asking the wrong questions," the voice said. "No," Mara replied calmly. "I'm just asking them out loud." A pause. Then, quieter. "You think Evan was the first?" The line went dead. Mara stared at the phone long after the call ended. The first disappearance, connected to the myth, had happened 3 years earlier. A cybersecurity contractor named Daniel Reyes. No criminal record. No public trial. He'd boarded a flight to Europe and never landed. His family was told he'd been reassigned under classified authority. Then there was Marta Kovac, an Eastern European activist arrested during a port protest. CCTV showed her entering a holding van. She was never booked. The pattern was there, scattered across continents, buried under bureaucracy and distance. People who knew too much. People who couldn't be tried without exposure. People who couldn't be allowed to exist. Lena received a reply at 2:14 a.m. One line. "Stop using names. Come alone. Doc 47. Dawn." Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. She didn't know if Adrian Cole was alive, compromised, or bait. But Evan had trusted him once. And Evan was dead. Or had been. The distinction no longer mattered. Dock 47 was abandoned in all the ways that mattered. Rusted cranes loomed like skeletons, the water below dark and opaque. Lena arrived early, heart racing with every sound. A figure emerged from the shadows, thinner than she expected, face lined by more than age. "Don't come closer," he said. "Adrian?" she asked. He nodded once. "You shouldn't be here." "Evan died for this," Lena said. "Tell me why." Adrian laughed bitterly. "Because he believed the word facility meant something humane." He gestured toward the water. "They told us it was a containment solution. No bars. No violence. Just isolation. Pressure. Silence." "What is it?" Lena asked. Adrian hesitated. "It's not one prison. It's a system. Modular habitats anchored deep enough that escape is physically impossible. No guards inside. Just remote locks. Monitoring. Algorithms deciding who gets air, light, food. Lena felt sick. That's execution with extra steps. They don't call it execution, Adrian said. They call it indefinite holding. And Evan? Adrian's jaw tightened. Evan found the maintenance schedules. The resupply routes. He was never supposed to get that close. Is it real? She pressed. The underwater prison. Adrian met her eyes. It's real. And it's operational. Mara broke into Evan's cloud account using a password she shouldn't have guessed so easily. Inside were drafts of articles he'd never published. One headline froze her. The prison that leaves no records. Attached were audio files. Evan's voice, tired but determined. If you're hearing this, he said in one, it means they didn't stop me in time. Or they did. Another file ended mid-sentence, cut by static. There's a transfer scheduled. They're moving detainees to a deeper site. If that happens, no one. The recording stopped. Mara's chest tightened. A transfer meant urgency. Movement meant opportunity. Or disaster. By the end of the week, 3 things happened. First, Lena Voss vanished. Her apartment was untouched. Phone left behind. No sign of struggle. Second, a maintenance vessel registered under a shell company altered course in the middle of the night, heading toward a restricted maritime zone. Third, Mara received an envelope under her door. No return address. Inside was a laminated badge. Old. Water damaged. It bore a logo she recognized from Evan's files. Black Current, authorized access. And on the back, handwritten in faded ink. You have 48 hours. After that, it all goes under. Mara sat on her couch, badge heavy in her hand, mind racing. She was being invited or challenged. Either way, someone had decided she was already too deep to save. Far beneath the waves, alarms pulsed softly through steel corridors. A system recalibrated. Oxygen levels adjusted. A voice, synthetic calm, announced a protocol shift. Containment breach risk elevated, it said. Human interference detected. In a cell illuminated by cold blue light, a woman pressed her hand against reinforced glass, watching shadows move beyond it. She hadn't seen another human face in weeks. But she recognized the vibration now. Resupply meant something was changing. And change down here was dangerous. Mara packed a bag she might not come back with. She left her badge, her gun, everything that tied her to official channels. All she took was the flash drive, the access badge, and the certainty that whatever waited beneath the surface had already claimed too many lives. As she stepped into the night, her phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. You're not the only one looking for the truth, it read. But you might be the last. Mara didn't reply. She headed for the harbor. Because if the underwater prison was real, if it truly existed beyond law and light, then exposing it wouldn't just be dangerous. It would be fatal. And someone down there already knew her name. The depth where truth drowns. The sea was calm the night Mara boarded the vessel. Too calm. The maintenance ship sat low in the water, its hull scarred and unmarked, a floating absence rather than a presence. No flags. No visible crew. Just a humming beneath the deck that vibrated through her bones, as if the ocean itself were breathing through steel. She slipped aboard unnoticed. The access badge worked. That terrified her more than if it hadn't. Below deck, the corridors were narrow and dim, lit by blue emergency strips embedded along the floor. The air smelled sterile, filtered, artificial. Every step echoed too loudly, as though the ship were listening. Mara found the control room, exactly where the schematics said it would be. Banks of monitors showed nothing at first, just pressure readings, oxygen levels, system diagnostics, scrolling endlessly. Then one screen flickered. A grid of cells appeared, each one a box of reinforced glass and steel, illuminated by cold blue light. Inside some, figures sat motionless. In others, they paced like animals trapped in thought rather than space. No guards. No doors. Just people sealed beneath kilometers of water. The underwater prison wasn't a myth. It was a spreadsheet. She scrolled through detainee profiles, her hands shaking. Names were replaced by alphanumeric codes. Crimes listed in vague terms: threat to national stability, classified breach, security anomaly. No trial dates. No release conditions. One profile made her breath hitch. D. 4172. Status: active. Last transfer: 72 hours ago. Attached image: grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. Lena Voss. Alive. Mara swallowed hard. The timeline snapped into place. Evan hadn't been silenced because he was wrong. He'd been silenced because he was early. An alarm pulsed softly through the ship, not loud enough to panic, just enough to warn. Unauthorized access detected. Mara backed away from the console, heart hammering. Footsteps echoed somewhere above her, measured, unhurried. Whoever was coming wasn't rushing. They didn't need to. She ducked into a maintenance corridor as a man entered the control room. He wore no uniform, just a dark jacket and an expression of practiced calm. Adrian Cole. Alive. Detective Hale, he said quietly, not looking around. You made it further than Evan did. Mara stepped out, gun raised. You're running this. Adrian shook his head. I helped design it. That's different. You lied to Lena, Mara said. You sent her down there. She insisted on proof, he replied. So did Evan. And what did you insist on? Mara demanded. Adrian finally turned to face her. His eyes were hollow. Control. He explained as the ship descended. The prison hadn't been built to punish criminals. It had been built to manage risk. People whose existence complicated politics, economics, alliances. People too visible to kill, too dangerous to ignore. They don't die, Adrian said as the submersible detached from a vessel. Not quickly. The system sustains them, monitors them, breaks them without leaving a mark. The viewport filled with darkness as they sank. The pressure creaked around them like a living thing. Why tell me? Mara asked. Adrian's smile was thin. Because the system is failing. The underwater complex emerged from the dark like a nightmare architecture. Modules anchored to the seabed, connected by thick conduits pulsing faintly with light. It looked less like a prison and more like a deep-sea organism. As they docked, alarms intensified. Containment instability, the synthetic voice announced. Manual override required. Adrian swore under his breath. They've accelerated the transfer. If the deeper site activates, this one gets wiped. Wiped how? Mara asked. Adrian didn't answer. They entered through an airlock that sealed behind them with a final hiss. The corridors were colder here, the blue light harsher. Cameras tracked their movement, lenses adjusting silently. Mara felt watched in a way that went beyond sight. They reached Lena's cell first. She stood when she saw them, thinner than Mara remembered, eyes sharp with something that hadn't been broken yet. Mara, Lena whispered, disbelief flooding her face. I knew someone would come. Adrian began typing at a panel. We don't have long. The glass retracted slowly, depressurizing with a low groan. Lena staggered forward, catching herself against Mara. They're moving everyone, Lena said urgently. Downward. Deeper. The ones who ask questions disappear first. Evan. Mara asked. Lena's eyes darkened. They took him during a test run. Said the pressure failure was accidental. It wasn't. Mara knew that now. As they moved through the facility, doors began sealing automatically. Red warnings flashed across panels. System override denied, the voice intoned. Protocol black current engaged. Adrian froze. They're locking us in, he said. If we don't surface now. A tremor shook the corridor, subtle but unmistakable. Mara grabbed his collar. You said the system was failing. What aren't you telling me? Adrian's composure cracked. The deeper site isn't stable. It was rushed. If they transfer the detainees, the pressure differentials. The whole structure collapses, Mara finished. Yes. Everyone dies. Yes. They reached the central hub, a chamber dominated by a massive core humming with energy. Data streamed across its surface like a living map. This controls the locks, Adrian said. The life support, the feeds, and the kill switch? Mara asked. Adrian hesitated. There is no kill switch. Mara pulled the flash drive from her pocket. Evan thought there was. Adrian stared at it, realization dawning. He embedded a loop. They plugged it in. The system stuttered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every screen lit up. Live feeds. Names. Faces. The prison was broadcasting itself. External uplink established, the voice announced, no longer calm. Unauthorized disclosure in progress. Mara felt a fierce, grim satisfaction. That's the point. Above the surface, servers lit up across continents. Journalists received files they hadn't requested. Activists saw proof they'd been mocked for suggesting. Governments scrambled as classified operations spilled into public view. The myth drowned. The truth surfaced. But the ocean didn't care about truth. The tremors worsened. Alarms screamed now, the calm voice replaced by frantic warnings. Structural integrity compromised, it blared. Immediate evacuation required. Adrian stared at the screens, horror etched into his face. It's too late. The deeper sight activated early. The pressure. Lena grabbed Mara's arm. There's an escape pod. I saw it. Emergency use only. They ran. The corridors twisted as the facility shifted. Metal groaning under impossible strain. Water seeped through seams, droplets floating eerily before alarms forced gravity to remember itself. They reached the pod bay just as a conduit burst behind them, water slamming into the corridor with crushing force. The pod held 3. Adrian stopped at the hatch. I'm not coming, he said. Mara stared at him. You can't stay. I built this, he replied quietly. I won't escape it. Before she could argue, he slammed the hatch shut, locking it from the outside. The pod launched as the facility convulsed. Through the viewport, Mara saw the prison fold in on itself, modules collapsing like broken ribs. Blue light vanished into black. Then, nothing. They surfaced hours later. Rescue boats found them drifting, half-frozen, alive. The story exploded within days. Official statements contradicted leaked footage. Investigations were announced. Resignations followed. Some called it a tragedy. Others called it a necessary exposure. No one called it justice, because too many names were still missing. Months later, Mara stood at a quiet shoreline, watching waves roll in under a gray sky. Lena stood beside her, a notebook tucked under her arm. They'll deny it for years, Lena said. Change a few terms. Build something similar somewhere else. Mara nodded. But they'll never be able to say it wasn't real. Lena looked out at the water. Do you think anyone else made it out? Mara didn't answer right away. Far offshore, a buoy bobbed gently, its light blinking blue. Once, twice, 3 times. A pattern Evan had described in one of his recordings. I don't know, Mara said finally. But I know this. She turned back toward land. Some prisons don't need walls. And some truths don't stay buried. As they walked away, the ocean closed in behind them, calm and endless, guarding secrets it would never give back. And somewhere deep beneath the surface, a system designed to erase people left behind one final record. A signal, still transmitting.